that 508 would be closed, right? And that history. But I want to save that a little bit. So yeah, Jake, you want to say something? Okay. So are we good with this right here? Any objections?
I'm still wondering about the daily. We're just using Ellen White's condoning what those other guys had already found, but I'd like to know how they found. I guess we could research it on our own. But.
Yeah, it's William Miller. Right? Mm-hmm. It's William Miller and his finding of the daily. His finding of the daily, and it's a little bit nuanced, but in conjunction with 2 Thessalonians. Okay. Right? Those are the 2 Thessalonians is what William Miller used to explain the daily. And there has to be a little bit of understanding as to why the daily, the word sacrifice is supplied, why the translators put that there, why they were mistakenly putting the word sacrifice into that verse. And let's break that down, I guess, on a different occasion. Right? But it's very clear. It's very clear. So if you get hung up on the daily, it's not that big of a deal because it's very, very clear. And the pioneers, as far as the daily is concerned, are clear. It's so clear. I can't understand actually how there's so much confusion on the daily today in Adventism. Right?
I'm actually asking for prosperity's sake.
Right. Yeah, and we'll get into the that discussion next time. But it is significant that the daily being paganism, understood to be paganism, the other interpretation of the daily today at the end of the world in Adventism is what?
Sanctuary service?
Right? The sanctuary service. Now that's not close. That's not right. Those are two completely different things. One is paganism, a satanic power, and the other interpretation in our church being the heavenly sanctuary service. That's not close.
It's like a smokescreen to keep it off paganism.
Yeah. To me, that's problematic, but we don't even want to talk about it. Right? It's something that we sweep under the rug. There's no discussion as to that. And, okay, but we're okay with this, right? We're okay with this, hopefully, and hopefully you can study that a little bit. But I want to continue reading. Let's continue reading and break this down a little bit more. If we could, let's read from verse 15. Well, actually, let's read from 13 again so we can solidify it a little bit more. 13 through 19. If somebody could read that for us.
And another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, "How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?" And he said to me, "For 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed." Then it happened, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the wall, who called and said, "Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell on my face. But he said to me, Understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and stood me upright. Then he said, Look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of indignation. For at the appointed time the end shall be.
Okay. So shall be the vision in verse 17. As Daniel is seeking to understand the vision of Daniel chapter 8, the phrase the time of the end, when do we place that time period of the time of the end?
1798.
1798. So we find it again. As the vision is being expounded upon and explained, we find 1798 coming up again. But we also know that the end of the 2300 days is 1844. So we find both of those time periods. Fair? Fair to say? Okay. In verse 19, I'm going to read the King James. The King James says, He said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. The last end of the indignation. Right? The last end of the indignation. If there is, so 1798 and 1844, the end, okay, the end of the indignation. This verse is speaking to the last end of the indignation, or 1844, right? The last end of the indignation. So if there's a last, there must be a what? There must be a first. Okay? Just as it says in Daniel chapter 8, verse 3, when talking about the ram and the two horns, Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up what? Last. So if there is a horn that comes up last, there has to be a what? Horn that comes up first. First and the last. Just here, just as it is in the indignation, if there's the last end of the indignation, then there must be a first. Okay? So this is what we're looking at in the chart. This is what we're looking at. This is William Miller's understanding. Okay? At the top of the chart, the first prophetic period, or the first indignation, well, let me put it like this. From 1844, the last end of the indignation, William Miller puts the close of this time period goes from 1844. I'm doing that too long. All the way beginning at 677. Right? From 1844 beginning in 677. And this is the 2520. And okay, I'm not gonna talk too much about the 2520, but I am gonna say this. All right, let's go to two texts. Let's go to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 33:11. Second Chronicles 30.